Oh my God, do you remember her? What? Wasn't she the girl who ate lunch alone in the mechanics room?
They thought she'd stay small forever. They mocked her, dismissed her, erased her. So tonight, they invited her back as a joke. But when the chandeliers shook, and a military helicopter dropped onto their perfect lawn, they learned far too late that the girl they tried to bury had become someone they should never have underestimated. Welcome to Golden Heart Stories. This is the night they realized she had outgrown everything they once used to define her. Dawn light crept across the manicured grounds of the Aster Crown Hotel, illuminating something that should not have been there. Deep gashes tore through the emerald lawn in circular patterns, each groove wide enough to swallow a man's boot. The grass lay flattened and burned in places, as if something massive had pressed down with tremendous force. Morning dew gathered in the wounds, reflecting the pale sky like scattered mirrors. The elegant garden that had hosted countless weddings now bore scars that spoke of violence and power. Martin Torres, head groundskeeper for 17 years, approached the destruction with slow, hesitant steps. His weathered hands trembled as he lowered himself to one knee beside the largest mark. His calloused fingers pressed into the torn earth, feeling how deep the cuts ran, sensing how the soil had been compressed and twisted by immense weight. His brow furrowed deeply as he tried to reconcile what he saw with any explanation that made sense. A vehicle? Too precise. A prank? Too destructive. Something had descended here with the weight of machinery, had hovered and pivoted with mechanical precision, then departed with enough force to leave these permanent wounds carved into the ground. He wiped dirt from his palm onto his work pants, his jaw tight with confusion and growing unease. Inside the security office, 3 monitors glowed in the dim room. As footage replayed for the 7th time, the timestamp showed 11:43 the previous night. Then the screen erupted into chaos. Blinding searchlights swept across the garden, drowning out every detail in white glare. Wind visible only through its effects, chairs tumbling end over end, tablecloths whipping free, guests stumbling backward, with hands desperately shielding their faces, dominated every frame. Human silhouettes scattered like leaves in a violent storm, some dropping to the ground, others fleeing toward the hotel entrance with arms raised. The audio track captured only roaring wind and indistinct shouts of panic. Security Chief Ramirez leaned forward until his nose nearly touched the screen, replaying the same 30 seconds, searching desperately for anything solid within the visual chaos. But the footage revealed nothing concrete, only wind and light and human fear frozen in digital memory. Outside the hotel's main entrance, reporter Chelsea Park held a microphone steady while her cameraman adjusted the angle. Across from her stood Miguel Santos, a waiter who had been serving champagne when the disruption began. His hands clutched a folded apron, wringing the fabric as if trying to squeeze certainty from confusion. His face had gone pale, his eyes still wide with the memory of what he had experienced. His voice emerged thin and unsteady, each word requiring visible effort. The ground, it started shaking, not like an earthquake, more focused, concentrated, like standing next to an engine room when everything's running full power. The vibration came up through my feet, through my legs, through my whole body. Everyone dropped their glasses at once. Some people screamed. I couldn't see anything through the dust and wind, just felt this tremendous pressure pushing down on all of us, forcing us back. His eyes darted toward the scarred garden, then away quickly, as if even the memory disturbed him too much to hold. Chelsea pressed him with another question about what he had seen, but Miguel only shook his head slowly, his throat working as he struggled to find words for something beyond normal experience. Near the deepest rotor mark, hotel maintenance worker Denise crouched low, examining the compressed grass along the outer perimeter with methodical attention. Her flashlight beam swept across the ground until it caught something small and distinct, pressed clearly into the soft earth beside the landing zone. A boot print, not large, possibly a woman's size 7 or 8, with a treaded pattern. Too precise and deliberate to be recreational footwear. Military issue, perhaps, or specialized tactical gear, designed for specific operations. She leaned closer, noting how cleanly the impression had been made. How the person who left it had stepped deliberately and confidently, with unmistakable purpose. This was not the chaotic footprint of someone fleeing. This was someone who had arrived with clear intention, had stood here performing some calculated action, then departed with equal precision and control. Denise pulled out her phone and photographed the print from multiple angles, her pulse quickening with the sudden realization that this small detail might be the first real clue to unlocking what had descended upon the Aster Crown Hotel. Fog clung to Riverside Heights high like a shroud, turning the morning gray and indistinct. 15-year-old Rhea Calloway moved through the yard with her head bowed, arms wrapped around battered textbooks held together with yellow duct tape. Her shoulders hunched forward, worn sneakers making soft sounds against damp pavement. The fog swallowed her small frame, making her nearly invisible among clusters of students. Her dark hair hung loose, framing a face that carried exhaustion beyond her years. Students flowed past her in rushing streams, their voices loud and careless as they called out to friends across the yard. "Did you see Tyler's new car? His dad bought him the Mustang." "No way. I heard it's totally custom. We're hitting the mall after school, you coming?" "Only if Brady's driving. I'm not riding with Sarah again." Bodies brushed against her without pause, without acknowledgement, as if she were simply an obstacle to navigate around rather than a person. A girl's high-pitched laugh cut through the air. "Oh my God, Jenny, stop. You're killing me." "I'm serious though." He actually said that. Their voices rang out sharp and bright in the heavy morning air, echoing off the brick walls. Rhea kept her eyes fixed on the path ahead, her jaw set tight, breathing steady and controlled. She did not lift her gaze to meet anyone's eyes. She did not slow her pace or alter her direction when someone cut directly in front of her. Two boys nearly collided with her, too absorbed in their conversation to notice. "Dude, the test is gonna wreck us." "Whatever, I'll just copy off Marcus like always." "Marcus barely passed last time." "You're screwed." She simply adjusted her grip on the textbooks, knuckles white with effort, and continued forward through the crowd that refused to see her. The auto mechanics classroom sat at the far end of the industrial arts wing, tucked away where most students never ventured during lunch. Rhea slipped through the door. Motor oil and metal filings replaced the fog's dampness. She moved to the back corner where tall shelves blocked the hallway windows. Surrounded by engine parts, her shoulders finally dropped. She pulled a brown bag from her backpack and unwrapped a worn sandwich. But her attention drifted to the workbench where a poster displayed helicopter rotor diagrams. Her fingers traced the mechanical drawings, studying blade pitch angles and swash plate mechanisms with intensity that made everything else disappear. The door banged open without warning. Damon Kells strode in with two friends flanking him, expensive sneakers squeaking against concrete. "Yo, Damon, why are we even in here? This place reeks. Just need to grab something. Won't take long." He spotted Rhea immediately, his mouth curving into a smirk. He altered his path deliberately, angling toward her corner. As he passed, his shoulder drove into hers with calculated force, sending her sandwich tumbling to the floor. "Oh sorry, didn't see you there in those garage sale clothes. Maybe try wearing something visible next time." His friends laughed on cue, harsh and performative. "Dude, that's cold." She probably didn't even notice. Does she ever talk? I don't think I've ever heard her say a word. Damon did not look back as he continued toward the exit, his mission accomplished. Rhea remained still for 3 long seconds, hands flat on the workbench, breathing unchanged. Then she bent down, retrieved what remained of her sandwich, and wrapped it back without expression. Her face revealed nothing, no anger, no hurt, no embarrassment. She set the bag aside and returned her attention to the diagrams as if the interruption had been nothing more than background noise. On the workbench sat a broken model helicopter, rotor blades bent at unnatural angles, tail boom cracked and hanging loose. Abandoned weeks ago, deemed beyond repair. Rhea pulled it closer and examined the damage. Her hands moved with surprising confidence as she located a toolkit. She worked methodically, straightening bent blades, using epoxy to reinforce the tail boom, adjusting the rotor hub until it spun freely. Behind her, voices drifted through the open door. "Look at his backpack, it's from like 5 years ago. My little sister has the same one. So embarrassing. Someone should tell him charity shops exist for a reason." The cruel words hung in the air, but Rhea's hands never trembled. Her focus never wavered. She tightened the final screw, tested the rotor mechanism, and watched the blades spin smoothly in her palm. The insults faded into static as she set the repaired helicopter back on the shelf, whole again despite everything that had tried to break it. The kitchen light burned dim in the pre-dawn hours. Rhea pushed open the door quietly and froze when she saw her father slumped at the table. His forehead rested on his crossed arms, still wearing his factory uniform stained with grease. His breathing came deep and steady, exhausted sleep after working through the night. On the table beside him sat an open cardboard box, edges worn from storage. Inside, arranged with military precision, lay medals and ribbons: Bronze Star, Purple Heart, campaign ribbons from deployments he never discussed. Rhea's fingers hovered over the box, tracing the air above them without touching. Her throat tightened as she studied her father's weathered hands, calloused and scarred from factory work that paid a fraction of what his skills deserved. She pulled a blanket from the closet and draped it over his shoulders, movements gentle enough not to wake him. His face, even in sleep, carried the weight of bills unpaid and dreams deferred. The hallway outside the guidance office smelled like floor cleaner and old carpet. Rhea walked past on her way to fourth period, her steps silent. Then voices drifted through the half-open door. That Calloway girl? Honestly, Margaret, I've seen her type before. No resources, no connections, barely passing grades. She won't make it beyond this town. Best she can hope for is maybe community college, if that. That's a shame. She seems quiet enough. Quiet doesn't pay bills. These kids need to be realistic about their futures. I can't work miracles with students who have nothing to work with. What about vocational programs? Please. She'd need transportation, money for tools, connections in trades. Where's that going to come from? Rhea's steps did not falter, but her hand tightened around the backpack strap until the nylon cut deep into her palm. Her jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. She continued down the hallway without breaking stride, her face carefully indifferent. But something shifted behind her eyes, a spark catching in dry tinder. The gymnasium had been transformed for the career fair, rows of booths displaying corporate logos and college banners. Students wandered through with varying interest, most gravitating toward tables offering free pens. Rhea moved along the outer edge, hands in her pockets, not stopping until something caught her eye. A poster dominated the Navy recruiting booth, a dramatic photograph of an MH-60 helicopter hovering over churning ocean water. Below the aircraft, Marines in full gear were being winched up from rough seas, spray exploding around them. The image radiated purpose and precision, danger and control in perfect balance. Rhea stood directly in front of it, unable to look away. A Navy recruiter noticed her stillness, the way she studied the poster with intensity. He was a chief petty officer, his uniform crisp, ribbons arranged across his chest. He approached slowly and spoke with quiet conviction. "You look like someone who doesn't flinch." Rhea turned to face him, startled. Most kids walk right past that poster. Too real, maybe. But you've been staring at it for 3 minutes straight. I didn't realize, she said quietly. That's a rescue op off the coast of Somalia. 14 Marines pulled from hostile waters in 60-knot winds. The pilot who flew that mission was 19 when she joined. Younger than most of these kids here. He held out a brochure, offering it with respect rather than as cheap advertising. There's different paths in aviation rescue, helicopter mechanics, even pilot training if you've got the scores and the drive. The question is whether you're willing to work for it. Rhea took it carefully, her fingers gripping the edges. The walk home took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that never changed. Houses with peeling paint, cars that barely ran, dreams measured in getting through the week. Rhea held the brochure against her chest, shielded from the wind. When she reached a corner where no one could see, she stopped and unfolded it completely. Her eyes moved across the words aviation rescue swimmer, naval aviator, aviation maintenance, each title a door she hadn't known existed. She refolded it with deliberate care, creasing each fold precisely, and slipped it into her jacket's inner pocket where it rested against her heart. Her steps resumed, but something had shifted. Her shoulders sat straighter. Her eyes focused forward rather than down. The words from the guidance office still echoed, but now they sounded different, not like a verdict, but like a challenge she intended to answer. The resolve forming inside her wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and absolute, settling into her bones like steel finding its shape. The rooftop bar sat perched on the 23rd floor, windows offering a panoramic view of Seattle's glittering skyline. Damon Kells arrived first, his tailored suit fitting perfectly, designer watch catching the light as he checked his phone. Verity Chen swept in moments later, stiletto heels clicking against polished concrete, red lipstick immaculate. Corbett Hayes followed with his usual swagger, loosening his tie. Lucas Moretti brought up the rear, tablet under his arm, already scrolling through something that made him smirk. They claimed a corner table with the best view, settling into leather seats as a server appeared to take their orders. The city spread below them like conquered territory, and their voices rose with the confidence of people who had never been told no. Verity pulled out her phone and began swiping through images. Her fingers moved quickly until she stopped, her eyes widening with theatrical delight. "Oh my God, you guys have to see this." She turned the phone toward the group, displaying a yearbook photo from 15 years ago. The image showed Rhea Calloway at 15, thin, hunched shoulders, eyes downcast, wearing an oversized thrift store sweater. Her hair hung limp and unstyled, her expression caught somewhere between invisible and resigned. Verity's laughter erupted first, bright and cutting. "The invisible girl. I completely forgot about her. Look at those clothes. Did she literally shop at garage sales?" Corbett leaned in closer, squinting at the photo, his mouth curving into a grin that held no warmth. "Wait, Calloway? I remember her now. She used to hide in the auto shop during lunch. Never said a word to anyone. Because no one wanted to hear from her," Verity added, sipping her martini. Lucas studied the photo more carefully, his expression shifting from amusement to calculation. He set down his tablet and gestured toward Verity's phone. "We should totally invite her to the reunion. Think about it, everyone can see she hasn't changed. Still probably wearing the same thrift store wardrobe, still working some dead-end job in that nowhere town." Damon's eyebrows rose with interest, his fingers drumming against the table. "That's actually brilliant. It'll make everyone else feel better about their lives. Plus, imagine her face when she walks in and realizes she's still at the bottom." Verity clapped her hands together, delighted. "Oh, this is perfect. Should we put her on the special outreach list? You know, the ones we're supposedly trying to reconnect with?" "Absolutely," Lucas confirmed, pulling his tablet back out. Damon reached for the reunion planning document on Lucas's tablet, scrolling to the attendee list. His fingers moved with purpose as he typed Ray's name into the spreadsheet. But he didn't stop there. In the internal notes column visible only to the organizing committee, his fingers flew across the keyboard. The words appeared, "Charity case invite. Let's see if she shows up in garage sale chic." He hit save with a satisfied tap, then pushed the tablet back toward the center so the others could see. Verity leaned forward and read the note, her smile widening. Corbett chuckled, shaking his head as if this were all harmless nostalgia rather than weaponized cruelty. The server returned with their drinks, craft cocktails in elegant glassware, each one costing more than Ray's father probably made in a day. Damon raised his glass first, and the others followed. Their glasses met with a delicate chime, the sound bright and celebratory. "To the reunion," Damon announced, his voice carrying satisfaction. "To seeing how the other half lives," Verity added with a wicked grin. "To entertainment," Lucas concluded, and they all laughed as they drank. They settled back into their seats, already moving on to other topics: vacation plans, stock portfolios, real estate investments. Below them, Seattle glowed in the darkness, and somewhere in that vast sprawl was Rhea Calloway, whose name they had just added to their list with all the care one might give to selecting tonight's appetizer. None of them considered for even a moment that their harmless prank might have consequences. None of them imagined that the invisible girl might have spent 15 years becoming someone they wouldn't recognize. They were proud architects of a cruelty so casual they didn't even recognize it as such. Convinced they were simply having fun rather than setting something irreversible into motion. The Aster Crown Hotel ballroom had been transformed into a monument to nostalgia and manufactured success. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished marble, and round tables surrounded a central dance floor. Old classmates filled the space with carefully curated versions of themselves, voices rising in competition. "My marketing firm just landed the Nordstrom account. It's been insane. That's nothing. I closed 3 properties in Bellevue last month alone. You guys should see my new Tesla. The Model S, fully loaded. A woman gestured dramatically while describing her achievements, hands moving through the air. Nearby, a man laughed too loudly at his own joke about investments. Phone screens glowed everywhere as people angled for perfect selfies, smiles practiced and hollow. The air buzzed with performance, each person playing their role in a theater where everyone pretended to believe everyone else's carefully constructed lies. Without warning, the massive projection screen flickered to life. The automated slideshow cycled through yearbook photos. But when Rhea Calloway's freshman photo appeared, blown up to enormous proportions, the reaction was immediate. The image showed her at 15, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, wearing an oversized sweater that hung shapeless. Her hair was limp, her expression caught in that particular look of someone who had learned not to expect kindness. The photo held for 5 seconds while recognition rippled through the crowd. Then the laughter started, spreading from table to table like a contagion. People pointed at the screen, elbowing their companions. Oh my God, do you remember her? Wasn't she the girl who ate lunch alone in the mechanics room? Poor thing. Wonder what happened to her. I think she's still in our hometown. Never left. Probably working at the same grocery store her mom worked at. Did you see those clothes? Goodwill special. The laughter swelled, filling the elegant space. Some people had the grace to look uncomfortable, but most simply laughed along, caught up in collective cruelty that groups convince themselves is harmless. The photo finally transitioned, but the damage was done. On a table near the center, a champagne flute sat abandoned, golden liquid still bubbling. Then the surface began to ripple. The glass trembled slightly, creating tiny concentric circles. A low vibration traveled through the floor, so subtle at first that most guests didn't notice, absorbed in their conversations. But the vibration grew stronger, steady and rhythmic, like the pulse of something massive approaching. A few people paused mid-sentence, expressions shifting from confident to confused as they felt the floor humming beneath their feet. The chandeliers overhead began to sway, crystal pendants clicking together with soft musical notes. Corbett stood near the bar with his old circle, drink in hand, his face flushed from alcohol and satisfaction. He leaned back with casual confidence, eyes sweeping across the room. $10 says she shows up in the same thrift store sweater she wore in high school. Some people never change, you know? Still probably living in that same dumpy neighborhood, working at some grocery store or something. His friends chuckled, raising their glasses. You think she'll actually come? One asked. Oh, she'll come. People like that can't resist a chance to see what they're missing. This is going to be hilarious. Remember how she used to. But the words never came. A sudden gust of wind exploded through the ballroom with shocking force, as if an invisible hand had ripped open the terrace doors. The doors slammed inward with a thunderous crash that echoed off the marble walls, making everyone jump. Carefully arranged centerpieces scattered, flower petals and decorations flying through the air in chaotic swirl. Women shrieked and grabbed their dresses as wind whipped through the room. Men stumbled backward, raising arms to shield their faces from debris. The elegant atmosphere shattered instantly, replaced by confusion and the first stirrings of genuine fear. Corbett's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, the sound lost in chaos. His smug expression vanished, replaced by alarm as wind continued to roar through the open doors, bringing with it the distinct rhythmic thunder of something massive approaching through the night sky. The party had become something else entirely. They stood frozen, staring at the terrace doors that now framed only darkness and wind and the growing sound of rotors cutting through the air. The music had been pulsing through the ballroom speakers with manufactured energy. Then, without warning, it stuttered. The beat hiccuped once, twice, then cut out completely, leaving sudden silence. Confused murmurs filled the gap. What happened to the music? Is the power going out? Check your phone. Do you have service? The DJ frantically tapped at his equipment, his face illuminated by laptop glow as he tried to diagnose the problem. Before anyone could process what was happening, the chandeliers overhead began to sway with increasing violence. Crystal pendants clinked together rapidly, creating a discordant symphony. Several guests looked up simultaneously, conversations dying as they watched the massive fixtures swing back and forth. The instinct to see what was happening outside overtook the crowd. People moved toward the terrace in a disorganized surge, high heels clicking rapidly against marble. Some guests held their phones up immediately, already recording before they knew what they were capturing. They spilled onto the stone terrace overlooking the hotel gardens, cool night air hitting their faces as they clustered against the railing. The sky above had transformed from peaceful darkness into something alive with motion and sound. Their hands rose to shield their eyes as brilliant white searchlights blazed to life, sweeping across the garden and crowd with mechanical precision. The beams were so bright they left afterimages burned into retinas. Verity had followed the crowd outside, her phone already raised, thumb hovering over the record button. The searchlights played across her designer dress, casting harsh shadows. She began filming the chaos, people shouting, pointing at the sky, backing away from the railing. "Oh my God, what is that? Are you getting this? Film it, something's coming down." Then her phone began to vibrate violently, not with an incoming call but with something that felt wrong. The screen flickered with horizontal lines of interference, the image fragmenting into digital static. She pulled the phone away from her face, staring at it with genuine alarm. "My phone's freaking out. Is yours doing this?" "Mine too. It just died. I can't get any signal at all." Around her, others experienced the same phenomenon, phones buzzing and glitching, screens going dark or erupting with pixelated chaos. Inside the ballroom, security personnel scrambled with urgent efficiency. Their radios had become sources of harsh static that made communication nearly impossible. One guard yanked his radio away from his ear, wincing at the high-pitched squeal. Another frantically adjusted his frequency dial, finding only electronic screaming on each channel. Through the chaos, a voice managed to break through, fragmented, distorted, barely intelligible. "Object descending." The voice cut out, swallowed by interference. From the east, another fragment pushed through. "Requesting immediate." Static consumed the rest. The lead security officer grabbed his radio with both hands and pressed the transmit button, his knuckles white. "All units to the garden perimeter. I repeat, all units to the garden perimeter now." His voice carried the edge of someone trying to maintain control while feeling it slip away. The other guards responded immediately, abandoning their posts, converging on exits that led to the gardens. Their hands moved to their belts, checking equipment they hoped they wouldn't need. Outside, the wind had transformed into a force of nature. It roared across the terrace with such violence it felt like a physical presence trying to push the guests back inside. Dust and debris from the garden below rose in spiraling columns, creating a temporary sandstorm. People turned away, arms raised to protect their faces. The bright searchlights cut through the dust in visible beams, creating stark contrasts between illumination and shadow. The rhythmic thunder that had been growing suddenly intensified, no longer distant but immediate and overwhelming. It was the unmistakable sound of massive rotor blades cutting through air, each rotation creating a pressure wave that guests could feel in their chests. Some people stumbled backward, knocked off balance by the wind and the sheer acoustic assault. Others stood frozen, unable to process what their senses were telling them. Caught between fascination and the dawning realization that something far outside their comfortable reality was about to land in front of them. The MH-60S rescue helicopter descended through the night like a judgment from above, its massive frame blocking out stars. The rotor wash hit the ground with devastating force, transforming the manicured lawn into a battlefield of flying debris. Chairs tumbled end over end, metal frames scraping against stone. White tablecloths ripped free and whipped through the air like ghosts in a hurricane. Grass torn from the earth swirled in violent vortexes, stinging exposed skin. The noise was overwhelming rhythmic thunder of rotors, combining with turbine engines to create a wall of sound that pressed against eardrums and vibrated through bone. "Get back. Everyone get back. What the hell is happening? Is this some kind of military exercise? Someone call the police." Guests stumbled backward, some losing balance entirely and grabbing onto companions. Women's hair came undone, whipping across their faces. Men's ties flew horizontal, expensive suits flapping wildly. The helicopter's landing gear touched down with a heavy thud that sent a tremor through the ground. For a long moment, nothing happened. The rotors continued to spin, gradually slowing but still generating enough wind to keep everyone at a distance. Then the side door slid open with mechanical precision. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by cabin lights, form initially obscured by shadow and swirling dust. The figure stepped down onto the skid with practiced confidence, movements economical and controlled. As the rotor wash began to settle, the lights from the terrace caught the figure properly. The person wore a navy flight suit, distinctive sage green fabric. Crisp and professional, with patches on the shoulders and chest that carried unmistakable military authority. The helmet visor was still down, reflecting the hotel lights. The figure reached up with both hands and lifted the helmet clear in one smooth motion. Rhea Calloway's face emerged into the light. And the transformation from the yearbook photo was so complete it took several heartbeats for recognition to ripple through the crowd. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, emphasizing the sharp angles of her face that had been hidden beneath teenage awkwardness. Her expression was controlled and neutral, professional composure from years of high-stakes situations. Her eyes swept across the crowd with calmness that bordered on indifference. There was no anger in her gaze, no triumph, just steady assessment. Wait, is that? No way. That can't be her. Oh my God, it's Rhea Calloway. That's impossible. She's a pilot? A commander. Look at her uniform. Look at those patches. I don't understand. How did she? We invited her as a joke. This was supposed to be funny. Does she know? Does she know what we wrote? Shut up. Just shut up. She stood on the landing gear for a moment longer, letting the moment stretch, giving them time to understand. Around her, the helicopter's systems began their post-flight cycle, hydraulic systems hissing, electronics beeping, residual fuel vapor creating heat shimmer. A Navy petty officer emerged from the helicopter behind her, moving with practiced efficiency. He stepped down onto the grass, his boots sinking slightly into the torn earth, and turned to face Rhea with military precision. His right hand snapped up in a crisp salute, the gesture sharp and formal. Commander Calloway, perimeter secured. Area is clear for your movement. Rhea returned the salute with equal precision, her hand moving to her brow and back down. She gave a single nod of acknowledgement, then turned her attention back to the hotel and the crowd of her former classmates, who stood frozen on the terrace above. She began walking toward them, her stride confident and measured, boots crunching against gravel and torn grass. Each step carried purpose, the gait of someone who had walked into hostile territory before. The wind had finally begun to die down, the rotors spinning slower now, allowing individual sounds to emerge, someone's shocked gasp. The flutter of a flag, the creak of a damaged chair settling. Ray's expression remained unchanged as she approached, but something in her eyes suggested she was reading every face, cataloging every reaction. Measuring the distance between who they had been and who they had become. The invisible girl from 15 years ago had returned as something none of them had imagined. Possible someone with power, authority, and a helicopter that had torn their elegant evening apart as easily as she had once been torn apart by their casual cruelty. Commander Elias Rourke stepped through the terrace doors with the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention. His navy dress uniform was immaculate, medals and ribbons arranged in precise rows. His silver hair was cut military short, his weathered face carrying the kind of authority that made people instinctively straighten. He moved through the silent crowd, his presence creating a ripple as guests parted. He positioned himself at the microphone, hands clasped behind his back, gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. Good evening. I am Commander Elias Rourke, United States Navy. I'm here tonight to introduce someone many of you believe you knew 15 years ago. Commander Rhea Calloway graduated top of her class from Naval Academy Annapolis. She completed flight training at Naval Air Station Pensacola with distinction, and became one of the youngest helicopter pilots to qualify for combat search and rescue operations. As he spoke, the massive screens flickered to life. The images were nothing like the awkward yearbook photo from earlier. These were official military photographs and footage. The first showed Rhea in her flight suit before an MH-60 helicopter, expression professional. The second showed her receiving a medal, hand raised in salute. Then came footage, shaky helmet camera video from inside a helicopter during an active operation. The view through the open cabin door showed the aircraft hovering low over churning ocean water. Below, Marines in full gear struggled in rough seas, waves crashing over them. What you're seeing is footage from an operation in the Gulf 3 years ago. Commander Calloway and her crew extracted a Marine reconnaissance team that had been compromised during a classified operation. They were under active enemy fire. The sea state was at the operational limit. Weather conditions were deteriorating rapidly. The footage showed the rescue basket being lowered, swaying violently in rotor wash and ocean spray. The helicopter pitched and rolled, fighting to maintain position as waves exploded around the Marines. One by one, figures were hoisted up, the cable operator working with desperate efficiency as tracer rounds occasionally streaked across the frame. The final Marine was pulled aboard as the helicopter banked hard. Commander Calloway held her aircraft in position for 14 minutes under sustained fire to ensure all 12 Marines were recovered. Not a single life was lost. For this, she was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. The screens shifted to show official citations, commendations, military news articles. Each image reinforced the impossible truth: the invisible girl they had mocked had become someone extraordinary. Throughout the ballroom, guests began to move. It started with older men whose posture suggested military backgrounds. They rose slowly, deliberately, faces set with solemn respect. One by one, others joined them. They came to attention and raised their hands in salute, the gesture spreading like a wave of recognition. The salutes were held steady, formal acknowledgments that created stark contrast to the earlier shallow celebration. Damon Kells stood near the back of the room, his champagne glass hanging forgotten in his hand. His face had gone pale, all the smugness and confidence drained away. His mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no words came. His eyes remained fixed on the screens showing Rhea's achievements, each image another nail in the coffin of his carefully maintained superiority. The realization was hitting him in waves, not just that he had been wrong about her, but the magnitude of how wrong he had been. The bet about the thrift store sweater, the mocking notes on the invitation. The entire cruel premise of bringing her back to laugh at her failure, all of it was collapsing under the weight of reality. His hand began to tremble slightly, causing the champagne to ripple in the glass. At the front of the ballroom, Rhea stood perfectly still, her hands clasped loosely at her sides, her expression unchanged. She accepted the salutes with a slight nod but without pride or anger. Her face remained neutral, professional, the mask of someone who had learned to separate emotion from duty. She watched the crowd watching her, reading their faces with that same calm assessment. There was no triumph in her eyes, no satisfaction at seeing them finally understand. She had not come here to gloat or to punish. She had simply come to exist in their presence as she truly was, to stand before them as living proof that their judgment 15 years ago had been worthless and that their opinions had never mattered at all. Rhea reached into her flight suit breast pocket with deliberate slowness, her movements controlled and precise. She pulled out her phone, screen glowing softly. She navigated to her email and scrolled until she found what she was looking for. Then turned the phone outward, holding it up so the screen faced Damon and his friends who stood frozen nearby. The display showed an email thread with multiple replies stacked together. The sender names were visible: Damon Kells, Verity Chen, Lucas Moretti, Corbett Hayes, and beneath them, the subject line, Special Outreach Class Charity Cases. The internal notes were there too, the comments they thought were private, jokes about thrift store clothes and dead-end jobs, casual cruelty distilled into digital form. Damon's face drained of color, his skin taking on a waxy pallor. His mouth opened and closed several times, throat working as if trying to form words his brain couldn't construct. When sound finally emerged, it came out strangled and uncertain. That was we didn't mean. His hands came up in a placating gesture, palms out. He took a half step forward, then froze in an awkward stance suggesting both approach and retreat. His eyes darted between Rhea's face and the phone screen. It was just a joke. You have to understand, it was supposed to be funny. We thought it would be. The words tumbled out faster, tripping over themselves, each excuse more desperate and hollow. He was failing miserably at explaining away something that had no acceptable explanation. We didn't think you'd actually, we assumed you'd still be. He couldn't finish. There was no good way to finish it. While Damon stammered through his pathetic attempt at justification, Verity stood several feet away with her phone clutched in both hands, perfectly manicured nails pressing white crescents into the case. Her face had transformed from its earlier composure into something raw and frightened. She was staring at her own screen where something was unfolding in real time. Her thumb moved frantically, scrolling and refreshing. Oh God. Oh no no no. What is it? It's everywhere. Someone posted the footage. The rescue footage. It's going viral. How many views? 50,000. No, wait, 70,000. It's climbing. The comments, everyone's calling her a hero. Can you delete it? Take it down? It's not my post. Someone else shared it. Multiple people. I can't. The citations from Rhea's service record had begun appearing online, shared by someone in the ballroom, spreading with viral velocity. Comments piled up, words like heroic and inspiring, appearing alongside photos of Rhea in uniform contrasted with the yearbook photo. The narrative was writing itself in real time, and Verity understood with sickening clarity that she and her friends were on the wrong side of it. Her hands began to shake, causing the phone to tremble visibly. Rhea stood perfectly still throughout Damon's stammering performance, her expression unchanged, her posture relaxed but commanding. She let him struggle through his excuses without interruption, giving him all the rope he needed to hang himself with his own words. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried clearly across the space between them, cutting through his babbling like a scalpel. I came to see if you'd change. You haven't. The words were simple, delivered without anger or satisfaction, just a statement of observable fact. There was no accusation in her tone, no desire for apology, just acknowledgement of a truth that had been confirmed. She held his gaze for one more moment, long enough for him to fully absorb the weight of her assessment. Long enough for him to understand that she had measured him and found him exactly as worthless as he had once believed her to be. Then, without waiting for a response, without giving him the satisfaction of further engagement, she turned away. The movement was smooth and final, a dismissal more complete than any words could have been. Her boots made solid, purposeful sounds against the floor as she walked toward the exit. Each step carrying her further from people who had never mattered and never would. Behind her, Damon stood frozen in his half-formed gesture of pleading, his mouth still open, his excuses dying unfinished as he watched her back recede. Taking with her any chance he might have had for redemption. The crowd had begun to thin, conversations fragmenting into whispered discussions as guests processed what they had witnessed. Small groups huddled near the edges, phones glowing, some replaying footage while others scrolled through viral posts. The elegant reunion had transformed into something none had anticipated. Through this dispersing crowd, one figure moved with purpose. Jenna Morose navigated between clusters of former classmates, her expression set with resolve. Her hands were clasped in front of her, fingers interlaced tightly. She reached Rhea just as the commander was preparing to return to the terrace. Rhea, Commander Calloway, please, wait. Jenna's voice carried a tremor she couldn't suppress. Rhea turned at the sound of her name, her expression neutral but attentive. She said nothing, simply waited. I need to apologize. For high school. For staying silent when they were cruel to you. For never speaking up, never defending you, never even acknowledging what was happening. Jenna's words came faster now, as if she feared losing courage if she slowed down. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, her throat working between sentences. I saw everything. Every comment, every time they knocked your books over, every time they laughed. I saw it all and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that getting involved would just make me a target too. But that was cowardice. Pure cowardice. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she paused to draw a shaky breath. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. That I see now how wrong I was. The apology hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Jenna stood with her shoulders squared but trembling. Slightly, having delivered the words she had rehearsed for 15 years, now waiting for whatever response would come. Rhea studied her face for a long moment, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. Something shifted behind her eyes, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps recognition of genuine remorse. She gave a single nod, slow and deliberate, the gesture carrying more weight than words could have conveyed. It was acknowledgement without absolution, acceptance without erasing the past. Jenna's face crumpled slightly with relief and continued guilt in equal measure. And she nodded back, understanding that this was all she could reasonably expect. Rhea turned and walked back toward the terrace, her stride confident and measured. She crossed the threshold and stepped out into the cool night air, the rotor noise from the helicopter growing louder with each step. Behind her, through the open terrace doors, the ballroom full of former classmates had fallen into unusual stillness. The crew had already begun warm-up procedures, turbine engines cycling up with increasing intensity, rotors starting their rotation. The co-pilot ran through final checks, calling out readings to the flight engineer. The cabin lighting cast a warm glow against the darkness. Rhea approached the aircraft with the ease of someone returning home, her hand reaching for the grab handle with practiced familiarity. Inside the ballroom, guests began to move toward the terrace windows, drawn by the same instinct that had pulled them outside earlier. They pressed against the glass, crowding the terrace itself, creating a wall of faces backlit by chandeliers. Some held their phones up to capture video of the departure, though most simply watched in silence. Rhea climbed aboard the helicopter and settled into her seat, her movements economical and professional as she secured her harness and donned her helmet. Through the open cabin door, the crowd could see her in profile as she went through pre-flight communications with her crew. The rotor spin increased to operational speed, the downwash beginning to tear at the grass and create visible turbulence. The landing lights blazed to life, illuminating the scarred lawn one final time. The helicopter lifted smoothly off the ground, nose dipping slightly as it gained altitude and banked away from the hotel. The sound of the rotors filled the night, echoing off the building's facade, gradually fading as the aircraft gained distance. The guests at the windows watched it climb into the darkness, the navigation lights blinking red and green against the black sky, until finally the aircraft disappeared completely. The torn lawn remained behind, deep gouges carved into the grass, a permanent reminder of what they had failed to see 15 years ago, of the invisible girl who had returned not for revenge, but simply to exist in their presence as proof that their judgment had always been worthless and their cruelty had never mattered at all. Sometimes life brings people back into our path, not for revenge, but to show us how far we've come, and how wrong others once were. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who might need a reminder that dignity, courage, and quiet strength always rise in the end. And if you have a moment, leave a comment below. We read every single one, and your stories mean more than you know. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for watching. This has been Golden Heart Stories.